He cheated with my wife, humiliated me in front of my kids, and declared himself the new alpha. Hey Reddit. My wife, Emma, and I had been together for 12 years. We had 2 kids, an 8-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. I thought we were solid. Sure, we had the usual marital ups and downs, but I never once suspected she was cheating. Maybe I was too trusting. Maybe I was too caught up in work, thinking I was doing the right thing by making sure we had a good life. Turns out, while I was pulling long hours, another man was pulling her into our bed. It started with small things I ignored because I didn't want to believe the worst. She started dressing up more, wearing perfume even when she was just going to the grocery store. She was on her phone constantly, laughing at messages but locking the screen whenever I got near. Then, she started going out late, claiming it was just girls' night or that she needed space. I should have known. The signs were all there. One night, I came home early from work, and the house was unusually quiet. My kids were upstairs asleep, and the lights were dimmed. As I walked in, I heard muffled voices from our bedroom. My heart pounded. I wasn't prepared for what I saw when I pushed the door open. There he was. Some guy, tall, muscular, confident, lying in my bed, half-dressed, with my wife beside him. They both looked at me like I was the intruder. Like I was interrupting their moment. Emma didn't scream, didn't even seem guilty. She just stared, almost as if she had been expecting this to happen. I felt like my whole body went numb. I could hear my own breathing, my pulse pounding in my ears. My fists clenched automatically, but I didn't even know what to do. Rage, heartbreak, and disbelief all hit me at once. Then the guy, let's call him Rick, because that's exactly the kind of name he looked like he'd have, stood up, smirking at me like I was some pathetic loser. He stretched as if he had just woken up from a comfortable nap in my bed and said, "Guess you finally caught on, huh? Took you long enough." I wanted to swing. I wanted to knock that smug look off his face, but before I could even react, Emma stood between us and said, "Just stop, okay? It's over. We're over. I should have told you sooner, but Rick makes me happy. I don't love you anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own wife, the mother of my children, was throwing everything away for this guy? And saying it like I was just supposed to accept it and walk away? My stomach churned, and I felt sick. Then, as if the situation wasn't humiliating enough, my son woke up and walked into the room. He rubbed his eyes, looking confused. "Daddy? What's going on?" Before I could even say a word, Rick, still shirtless, turned to him and said, "Hey, buddy. I guess it's time we had a talk. Your mom and I are together now. I'm gonna be around a lot more." My blood boiled. This guy wasn't just sleeping with my wife, he was already trying to replace me in my own family. My son looked at me, waiting for an answer, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew something was wrong. I stepped forward, rage taking over. "You don't get to talk to my son. You don't get to be here. Get out of my house." Rick laughed. "Your house? Buddy, it stopped being yours a long time ago." And then, out of nowhere, he slapped me. He slapped me. Not a punch. Not a shove. A slap. In front of my son. In my own bedroom. It wasn't even about hurting me physically, it was about humiliating me, showing me that he had won. I stumbled back, my face burning, both from the hit and the shame of my son witnessing it. Emma just gasped but didn't move to stop him. She didn't even seem shocked. That was the moment I realized she had chosen him over me completely. She wasn't my wife anymore, she was his. My son started crying, and my daughter, now awake, stood in the hallway clutching her stuffed bear, watching everything unfold. I saw the fear in their eyes, the confusion, the sadness. It broke me. Rick smirked again and said, "Face it, man. I'm the new man of the house. You're done here. Move on." I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to fight. I wanted to make him pay. But I knew if I did, I'd just end up getting arrested, making things worse for my kids. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about them. Emma finally spoke up, her voice cold. "I think you should go, my name. We'll talk about everything later. Just leave." I looked at my kids, then back at them. My entire world had just been torn apart in the most humiliating, degrading way possible, and the people responsible were standing there, acting like I was just some inconvenience they wanted gone. I had no choice. I had to walk away, for now. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I wasn't going to let some home-wrecking piece of garbage take my family from me. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let my kids be raised by a man who thought slapping their father was a way to assert dominance. As I walked out that night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would get back at them. I didn't know how yet, but I would. And when I did, Rick would regret ever stepping into my home, and Emma would realize exactly what she threw away. This is just the beginning. Update: I spent that night in my car, parked outside a cheap motel because I couldn't bring myself to sleep under the same roof as them. My mind was racing, my heart pounding with a mix of anger, betrayal, and sheer disbelief. I kept replaying everything in my head, the smug look on Rick's face, the way Emma just stood there, and worst of all, the fear and confusion in my kids' eyes. I had to do something. I couldn't just let this guy waltz into my life, slap me in my own home, and take over my family. But I also couldn't let my emotions control me. I needed a plan. The next morning, I went straight to a lawyer. If Emma thought she could just shove me aside and play house with Rick while keeping my kids away from me, she had another thing coming. I laid everything out, the affair, the sudden way she discarded me, and, most importantly, the fact that this man had physically assaulted me in front of my children. My lawyer's expression darkened as I told the story. He told me I had a strong case for custody, especially since there was an act of violence involved. It wasn't just about the slap, it was about what it represented. If Rick was willing to do that in front of my kids on day one, what else was he capable of? But Emma wasn't going to make this easy. When I showed up later that day to talk to my kids, she refused to let me in. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face cold and distant. She acted like I was some intruder, like I hadn't spent over a decade building a life with her. She told me the kids were adjusting to the new situation and that I should give them space. Space? My own children? I refused to leave without at least seeing them, and that's when Rick appeared behind her, shirtless again, smirking like he had already won. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and said, "You just don't get it, do you, man? They're happy now. You're just making it harder for everyone by holding on." My blood boiled, but I kept my cool. Barely. I looked Emma dead in the eyes and said, "You can't keep them from me. You won't." Then I turned to Rick. "And you? You're nothing. Just some passing phase." Rick laughed, shaking his head like I was some pathetic joke. But Emma? For the first time, I saw something in her expression, doubt. Maybe, deep down, she knew what she was doing was wrong. But she was too caught up in whatever fantasy she had with this guy to admit it. I walked away that day, but not because I was giving up. No, I walked away because I knew the battle had just begun. And I wasn't going to lose. Another update. The legal process took time, but I stayed focused. I documented everything, every time she refused to let me see my kids, every instance where Rick was around them unsupervised, every little detail that could help my case. I made sure to spend every second I could with my kids, even if it was just during court-ordered visits. And during those visits, I noticed something that made my resolve even stronger. My son had changed. He was quieter, more withdrawn. My daughter clung to me more than ever, refusing to let go whenever it was time for me to leave. Something was wrong, but they wouldn't tell me what. They were scared. And that fear made my blood run cold. Then, one night, I got a call that changed everything. It was my son, whispering into the phone. He sounded scared. He told me Rick had been yelling at Mom. That he had thrown something, and my daughter had started crying. He told me he didn't feel safe. My hands were shaking as I told him to stay put, that I was coming. I didn't care about court orders, I didn't care about anything else, my kids were in danger. I raced to the house and banged on the door. Emma answered, her eyes red, looking like she had been crying. And behind her, I saw my son, holding my daughter close, his small arms wrapped protectively around her. I pushed past Emma and went straight to my kids. They ran into my arms, holding on to me like their lives depended on it. That's when Rick came out of the kitchen, his face twisted in anger. "What the hell are you doing here?" he barked. I turned to Emma, ignoring him completely. "This is over. I'm taking them." Emma opened her mouth to argue, but then she looked at our kids, the way they were clinging to me, the fear in their eyes. And for once, she hesitated. Maybe she finally saw what she had done. Rick, however, wasn't backing down. He took a step toward me, trying to puff himself up like he was some kind of alpha male. "You think you can just take them? You think you're in charge here?" And that's when I smiled. Because what he didn't know was that I had already called the cops. I had told them everything my son had said on the phone, and they were already on their way. Moments later, flashing red and blue lights filled the street. Rick's smug expression finally faded as officers stepped up to the door. Emma paled. It was over. Final update. Rick was arrested that night. Turns out, he had a record, a history of violence that Emma either didn't know about or had chosen to ignore. Either way, the moment the cops took him away, everything shifted. Emma broke down. She finally saw the mess she had created, the danger she had put our kids in. But it was too late for regrets. I took my kids home with me that night, and from that moment on, I fought tooth and nail for full custody. The evidence was in my favor: Rick's arrest, the emotional distress my kids had suffered, Emma's negligence in bringing a man like that into their lives. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. I got full custody. Emma was granted supervised visitation, but after everything, my kids didn't even want to see her. The trust was broken. She had chosen a man like Rick over her own family, and now, she was paying the price. As for me, I rebuilt. It wasn't easy. The betrayal left scars, and the humiliation of that night still lingered. But I had my kids, and that was all that mattered. I made sure they knew they were safe, that they were loved, that they would never have to live in fear again. And Rick? Last I heard, he was facing charges for more than just that night. Seems like he had a history of doing this to women, charming his way in, taking over, and then turning abusive. Emma was just another in a long line of victims. The difference was, this time, he got caught. I don't know if Emma will ever truly understand what she threw away, but I don't care anymore. My priority is my kids. And as I tuck them in at night, safe in our home, I know one thing for sure. I won.